Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Moment Mastermind. I'm Shira Lotzar, happy to be your host today, joined today by Alki Thompson, day after Thanksgiving. So I believe that Vern is on vacation. And we have two new folks with us today, Samuel and Edwina. And so, as you know, this is an open Q&A. So we are just happy to entertain whatever job questions you have on your mind on any aspect of job search. Oh, and we should let you know that we focus on U.S. Job search. Alki and I come from the DC area, so we have a special, sort of focus there. But we can certainly help with most opportunities. We'll let you know if it's something that we're not an expert in, but we're happy to try at least to help you out. So, who has a question?
I think I'll go. I'll ask a question. So, my question is something that I encountered doing an interview last week, where they asked me if I'm strong in one specific skills. I know that I do the skills, but I cannot consider myself as being strong. And I was wondering, how do you approach that in a job search? You can do something, but when they ask you, because for that skills, everybody, if you write, for example, let's take writing. You could be writing for someone and found strong writing, and somebody else, no, it's not. So how do you approach such a question in the search?
That's a great question. Actually, you know what, Alki, why don't you go ahead and tackle that first?
It's funny. Good morning. It's funny. I was smiling when you said that, because without belittling, I don't even know the organization. I don't know the opportunity, but that's one of those so are you strong in that skill? It is so subjective and relative to whoever is asking it. I mean, what do you mean strong? How do you judge strong? I could be, and you can answer honestly, but it may not be strong enough for them. So I think my general thought with questions like that are, if it feels normal to you and natural to say, oh, yes, I'm strong, I've done this before, here's my examples, and you begin sharing those examples, and that's the best you can do. If you're ever in question about that question, you could ask a question back for more clarity. How do you guys define strong? Or how would you define, your team members who you would say you're stronger? So what's, what level, what's the expectation that you evaluate and judge as strong? What types of projects, what types of examples? And then if they provide them and you're able to go, oh, yes, I've done that before, then you can speak on it. But that's one of those very subjective and potentially tricky questions. And all you can do is your best to answer.
Alki, that's a really great response. So I'll springboard off of that, right? Since you described it that way, and maybe give you a couple of examples. So like you mentioned writing. Okay, so there's strong writing, but then there's the type of writing. Are you looking for technical writing, creative writing, copywriting, persuasive writing, advocacy writing, donor communications, right? Like what kind of writing, right? So a person can be a strong writer, but may or may not have the experience in showcasing the writing in that way for that channel, for that audience. So you made that, to Alki's point, I would follow up and ask them, okay, so specifically what kind of writing did you need me to be expert in? And what kind of tone do you look for? Are you looking for someone who has sort of like an academic, scientific kind of writing? Are you looking for someone who does creative copy? Like those are two completely different kinds of writing. So that would be for like that kind of skill. But let's take a technical skill. Now, I'm not a technical person, but I'll just give you a simple one like Excel. Okay, so if someone says, are you strong in Excel? Well, what does that mean? How are you using Excel? How do you need me to use Excel? Do you need me to use it as a database, as a spreadsheet? Do you need me to just, total, like do some columns? Do you need me to do pivot tables? Like what, right? And what's the purpose of it, right? How do you need me to be using that technology or whatever the skill is, So Alki makes a really great point in terms of diving in a little deeper. And what you could do is to frame the question. You could say either, whatever the situation is, either you say, well, yes, I do believe that I'm strong in X. Now, Mr. or Ms. Employer, can you please elaborate in the ways that you need me to use this just so that we can have a conversation? Or you can say, you know what, I have knowledge of. So I have these. So for me, I like to say there's 3 different ways of talking about expertise. I'm either, there's a new person here. you're either strong, expert, advanced, whatever you want to call it, knowledgeable, and familiar with. Okay, or no knowledge at all. Or maybe even exposed to. Exposed to could be like a fourth category. So if you feel like you're knowledgeable in it, you could simply say that. I feel like I've decent knowledge or good knowledge or some knowledge. And can you please explain, right, in the ways that you need me to? The other thing you can do is ask them what kind of learning curve they are open to. Say, I definitely have knowledge. How much of a learning curve are you open to? Do you need me to hit the ground flying first day? Could I have a little bit of a learning curve? Is that okay? How important is this skill to know in an expert kind of way right off the bat? Can I grow into it? Right? Is this kind of skill something that I'm going to be using every day intensely? Or is it the kind of thing that's sort of a nice to have for you? Right? Does that make sense? You can ask all these kind of clarifying questions.
And one more thing, you said like there's 3 ways you could approach like what you know, like knowledgeable. There's like 2
So
other
yeah,
ones.
so the first one would be whatever they call expert, strong, advanced, whatever that is,
Mhm.
knowledgeable
Mhm.
and familiar with.
Familiar with.
Now
Perfect.
you could add to that exposed to. So
Oh.
let's say you're knowledgeable in something. Yeah, you've got some experience. Familiar with is maybe some light experience,
Mhm.
and exposed to would be you've heard of it, you've been around it. It's not right, not deep. The other thing you can do is you can compare it to something else, particularly if it's technology. So let's say it's a database, all right? And they want you to know database X, but you know database Y or Z or whatever. So
Mhm.
you could say, well, you know what? Hold on, I'm sorry. I think I've seen this happen before. Okay. So what you could say is, look, then they say, do you know database X? You can say to them, you know what? Actually, I have solid experience with database Y. I was able to pick it up very quickly. So I believe that I could really, I could learn database X, pretty fast. Is that okay? Is that okay for that kind of learning curve? Or do you absolutely need somebody who knows most of the features of database X right away?
Mhm. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What, Edwina, one question too, was that particular skill or thing that they were asking for, was it in the job description?
Yes, it was because and that's where I read it too. It said like the person needs to be familiar with that type of skills. And when they call me to schedule the interview, the first question they ask me, do you know Microsoft Word? And are you strong? And it's about writing. Are you a strong writer?
Mhm.
And right away, I'm like, okay, in my head, I'm like, I could write for anybody. And for
Mhm.
one person, it would be perfect. For another person, it's not what they want.
Right.
I was thinking and writing, and there I feel like, okay, this is really hard to answer because it
Mhm.
depends who I'm writing with and the type of writing they are going to ask me.
Mhm. Did they have also anything in the description about writing or just word?
Only word, and the person needs to be able to write a strong writer, something like that. That's what it was written in the description.
And
And that,
I asked that because, and I don't know if this is where Shira was going to go, but she always goes here, so I will take it out for her, at least this part. Um, we we always talk about when you look at the job description, you study it, you examine it, you know it back and forth, upside down, left and right. You can't always tell what they're going to ask in an interview, and they could also have like, you need to be familiar with these 85 things. Well, that's just way too much to know which one to focus on in an interview. But you also do get a good idea if you are reading the job description and it says writing, knowledge of, familiar with. They'll tell you a lot of times there too what level they're expecting, and also that they are expecting it, and thus you can expect a question in an interview. It's not always there, and sometimes they do take a side road like that. But now that you tell me word and writing were in the description, that's a good place to start preparing too. Like, okay, every time you see a bullet point skill or something like that, or experience or qualification, you make a note, and then that's when you start doing a self-assessment. Job description, me. Do I have that? Do I have that? How much of that do I have? Okay, I have that. Ooh, that could be tricky. And you can make a note for the interview. I need to be prepared to answer this question the ways that Shira just described.
Okay. And I believe they didn't say like when I received the call, that's when they said strong writer, but when you read it, it's just writing. So when
Yeah.
I think about, okay,
Right.
where I'm working right now, I'm doing writing, I write reports, you
Mhm.
know, and I'm like, okay, let me go ahead and apply. And that's, and only when I receive the call, that's when I'm like, okay, this is strong writing description, but now they're talking about strong writing. That's what kind of threw me off, actually. Yeah.
Asking deeper questions around the type of writing that they need. In fact, writing of all the kinds of skills that somebody could vet you on, that's one of the ones that you could actually provide some samples. In fact, sometimes these organizations will ask for writing samples at some point in the process, or even a writing test. So what
Okay.
you may want to do is you may want to offer that to them proactively and
Okay.
say, let me give you some samples, and pick ones that are reflective of the type of writing that you typically do. Again, is it academic and scientific? Is it
Mhm.
creative writing? Is it advocacy? Is it
Okay.
reports? Whatever, SOPs? I don't know. Whatever it is, I would give them a couple of examples of things that are very kind of classic for you in terms of the kind of writing you enjoy doing, the kind of writing you feel competent, and ask them, is this the kind of writing that you're looking for? Right. And
Okay.
they might be looking for something different. And that's important, especially for that particular skill, because there's so many different angles to it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mark, good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see
All
you,
right. Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving.
and happy Thanksgiving. Yes.
What's on your heart and mind?
My question is, relates to one I've told in the past. One has been fired from one's job, and one must explain to a new employer that transition.
Mhm.
So what does one say?
Well, that all depends. I know this is a
Yeah.
public forum that is being recorded.
Yes.
Can you remind us, just at whatever level you want, to share what happened so we can guide you through it?
I lost effectiveness at work owing to an alcohol problem, which is now handled, and was fired for that.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, obviously you don't want to go into any sort of medical, situation, because that opens up Americans with Disabilities Act. That's, you know that. I know. In fact, you're an attorney, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you are very well versed.
Yes.
Yeah. What you can say is that you had a personal challenge. That's okay. You can say that you were dealing with that affected your job performance. That's the truth, right? And that situation has since been resolved, and you are, fully able to return to work. But unfortunately, that's what happened then. And you're not at liberty to go into the details, but it was definitely a personal challenge. It affected, your life, and it affected your ability to work effectively. And it's unfortunate, but things happen in life. And now you're ready to go. That's what I would say, because personal challenge could be anything.
And
That's how I would do it.
and would you as a buyer buy that?
Depends on how you frame it. It's all in how you say it. Say, I had an unfortunate personal challenge that I'm unfortunately not at liberty to go into. But I, please know that it was something that I struggled with, but I needed to, I tried to make it work with my work, but sometimes life happens, right? That I would frame it in that way. Right? Sometimes we have blips in life, circumstances happen. It was personal life situation. And I just, please trust that I am ready to go. I am ready, willing, and able to give my full time and attention to a new employer. And that's it. Aki, any other thoughts?
Yeah, and that's great. Everything Sher just said, and I do remember some of your share from before, Mark. And now I have additional to add. People, most companies at some point you're going to have to, do a background check or something like that. Some companies ask for references, in the legal field. Given what it is and what industry it is, there's a lot of things that come with that. I'm sure, I think you talked about before too, your field is the type of field that it's a small circle, so a lot of people know a lot of people, which could work in your favor. I tell candidates a lot who have things in their background that they're scared about, nervous about. That's a lot of times where an advocate or advocates can help as well, so that you're not alone. So you're wondering, yeah, what are people going to say? Who's going to ask me this question? Oh, I don't want the employer to ask me this question. That's going to be a tough interview, blah, blah, blah. But if you have references that precede you, if you have people who know your work, who can speak on your behalf, which is where that networking comes in at too, where, you know, it's who you know, and I know you're already doing that. But also I would say maybe to include in your job search, executive search firms and recruiters as well, because Shira and I do that, but a lot of times, you know, we will ask candidates too, you know, hey, what's your deal? What do you have going on? Do you have any reason that you would, or, you know, do you have anything that's making you nervous about a background check, blah, blah, blah. And if there is, you can share that with us. A lot of times we hear that, we take that kind of like what you do with your clients. We take that to not use against you, but to know as truth, as your truth, so that when we do work with certain kind of clients, we know then, okay, not that client, not that client. They're kind of nervous and yada yada about certain types of people, but these over here, I'm able to share your story because I have a relationship with them. I know they've hired certain people in the past. That's not the biggest issue. Or I know, you know, Tim over there, he'll listen. So that could be an approach. I tend to believe that having an advocate like that in the form of at least one or two recruiters knocking on the door first for you before you go through it, a lot of times they can assist with that when it comes to the whole big thing of, yeah, job search, and now an interview's coming, they're gonna, you know, toss me out immediately. A lot of times a recruiter can help with that and speak on your behalf or explain on your behalf, or also give you advice on how to present yourself and protect, as Shira was talking about, to protect yourself and not divulge things that you don't need to divulge.
Now, with all of that said, we recruiters are in a very interesting spot, right? So if you share with us, if they, you know, kind of let your hair down, right? And share with us the exact, right? We are beholden by our ethics in recruiting not to divulge these things to the recruiter, to the employer. With that said, it puts us in a tricky spot, right? Because we can't unknow it. We can't unknow it. And I've certainly had that happen before, where somebody will share with me, oh, this medical situation or whatever it is. And I'm like, I can't say anything. I can't, I'm not allowed to. But then again, it's in the back of my head, not for me to discriminate. It's just that it's tricky because the employer might ask me, so why did such and such happen? I'm like, I can't say anything. Right. So you just have to be really kind of careful, because when you're talking to the recruiter, they can listen, but they're a human being too. And you want to make sure
that they also work for the employer.
And they work for the employer, but in terms of our ethics, we are not allowed to share any potentially discriminatory information on any level, anything that would be protected by EEOC. For those of you who don't know that, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, meaning there's a whole set of protections for people who are in what's called protected classes, right? So age, race, creed, color, sex, national origin, all of these things, on and on and on. If we know, as a recruiter, if we know anything about an individual that falls under what's called a protected class, we cannot divulge that to an employer, even though we work for the employer. It's not like we're just sort of one voice. There's a firewall. We can't. And the same thing with human resources. If I was a human resources professional, same thing. I wouldn't be able to share things. So, but that said, we're still human. And once we hear something, we've heard it. And so you just want to be very sensitive around what information you do share. That's why this idea of trying to keep things a little euphemistic, personal challenge. For some people, for example, who've had a medical situation where they've been out of commission, right, for a while. What I normally recommend is to say, I was dealing with a family medical situation. You can say family because you are your own family, as long as you're not making it personal. And if you frame it in that way, that's another way to go for people who've had something medically oriented. Okay. And then that's not going to bring up any discrimination flags. Is that helpful?
That is cool.
I'm glad you gave the other side of that coin too, Shira. And Mark, I know this is kind of like your world.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's that knowledge, and then yeah, there is a choice with that. If it is a recruiter or human resource, she threw out another idea too. It's definitely on you to decide like what you share, who you share. But a lot of times, even before applying, without giving a name as well, which can be tricky, but sometimes you can maybe approach human resources and just ask, hey, if a candidate wanted to apply for a role and, had some questions about this area, what do you advise? Or, and sometimes as Shira said, it should all be the same because of a lot of the rules, but organizations are still different, and they definitely have people and humans who operate differently. So it's just a thought. And as she said, if you do share it, yep, it's a human being who will now have that knowledge, and work.
Obviously, I would avoid sharing it, but there always does come that point in an interview where they're going to ask, "Oh,
What happened in your last role?"
yeah, but
Right.
what happened?"
Right. Yeah. So, and you do, Mark, you do employment law?
No, I do financial services law.
Ah, okay. Got it. Well, for what it's worth too, while we certainly hope and pray that everything works out and you can get your next job, but I'm not sure if maybe we vaguely mentioned this, but self-employment is always another option, right? For folks who've got, situations that are a little maybe trickier with W-2, because in self-employment, no one's asking you those things about your past. So for what that's worth, I just want to,
No,
plant
you're
that seed.
correct. You're correct.
Yeah.
My preference would be for an organization, but yes, it could end up being solo practice effectively.
Yeah. Solo practice is a way to go when you just want to, kind of level set everything.
Since you last saw us too, have you had conversations and interviews yet, and had to deal with this yet since you last saw us?
Well, in the sense that Veer, who sometimes participates in these programs, put me in touch with a woman who is fairly high up in human resources in the American Bankers Association. So she said she has sent my resume around, and I'm scheduled to have coffee with her on the 8th. We have not gotten into this kind of issue. And I will certainly avoid trying to do it, but if she asks, I need to know. Of lately, a friend who runs a small bank consultancy firm has pulled me in at the last minute to assist with the client matter. They've got a credit default securities book that they're having some difficulties with, and so they need some guidance as to how to portray these to their regulator. So I would say most recently that those are the two things that have been going for me.
All right. Well, we pray every success for you, Mark, in this next stage.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Samuel, any questions that we can support you with?
Great. So currently I don't really have like a very serious question, but I can just ask this. It's been bothering me for a while. I just wanted to know, like, sometimes when you're applying for a job, they ask for a bachelor's degree or maybe like any degree before you can get a job. And I know myself that I know it, right? Because I've been doing freelancing for a while. I do brand strategy and marketing. And currently I'm also working in sales too. So with the brand strategy and marketing, I know it. And I've run an agency of that before, and I know how it works. But sometimes when you apply for a job, they ask for bachelor's degree before you can get a job. And I just wanted to ask, like, is it really like necessary that you have to get a bachelor's degree before you can get a job? Or if you are able to show that you can do it, they can just consider that without even asking for the bachelor's degree?
It depends. Okay, it depends. So I'll give you the good news first. Okay, the good news is that over the last few years, with the push toward what's called DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, there are more companies, not everybody by any means, okay, but we have a little bit of a trend now where some organizations, in fact, even the state of Maryland, they actually the state of Maryland, the government itself, when they're trying to hire their employees, they actually have a new regulation that says that they cannot require a bachelor's degree unless it's, I don't know, necessary or whatever. But basically, what the point is that there's a little bit of a trend now that says, hey, employers are like, you know what? There are some people who we are discriminating against because they economically could not afford to go to college. Okay, and that is the case for some people. And so there's a little more of an awareness now, a little more openness to hiring people who don't have a college degree. That said, that's a little percentage over here. The majority of people who are looking for, individuals in a professional setting, like you're talking about, whether it's marketing or anything else, oftentimes it's like a knee jerk. They just sort of put bachelor's degree, and they don't even think about it. They don't even know why they're doing it, because just that's the way they do it. You got to have a bachelor's degree. Now, people like me, and I'm presuming Alki, will question that. Say, do they really need to have a bachelor's degree? Why do they need to? Now, there are some professions like attorneys, doctors, right? Like there's some, you need a degree, okay? But that's not the case with everything. And so some recruiters that will question that. But again, that's not everybody. Not every recruiter will question it. Not every recruiter knows to question it. And so what I would say to you is that if the employer says degree is required, sometimes they will say bachelor's degree or equivalent work experience. Sometimes they will say that. Look for those, okay? And even if they don't say equivalent experience, sometimes they will still be open, because they do it sort of like a knee jerk. Oh, let's just put a bachelor's degree. Like they don't even think about it. Sometimes that is the case, not always. So what you can do is you can apply, if you really, really, really believe you have the qualifications and you can demonstrate those qualifications on your resume. I mean, clearly, like you check those boxes. What I would do is I would be transparent. And whether it's in your cover letter, whether it's in the first interview, I would address it head on and say, look, I believe I'm very qualified for this role because of A, B, C. As you may notice, I have not completed a degree. Now, by the way, I don't know your specific situation, but sometimes a person just doesn't have a degree at all. Sometimes a person maybe gone to college a little bit, but and if you have and you're planning on graduating at some point, you can say I'm pursuing my degree. And if not, you just don't have college, then you can simply say, I really believe that I'm qualified for this role. I did happen to notice that you mentioned a bachelor's requirement. I wanted to know, is that hard and fast? Are you open to equivalent experience like I have, or do I actually need to have a bachelor's degree? Because the fact is that the recruiter was scanning down your resume, may not have even noticed that you didn't have a degree. And until all of a sudden at the end of the process, like, oops, we didn't check that box. So you address it up front, be honest, always be honest. What you do, the credentials you do and do not have, address it. If they said they needed this, say, I don't have this. However, I do have this experience. Is that okay? And case by case, they can let you know whether that is something that they're okay with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Alki, any other thoughts?
Complete agreement. And it's on the candidate. It's funny because a lot of times on this call, we tell everyone follow the job description to a T. So if you see it, even though, like Shira said, some companies, they have it set on default. All 350 jobs they post in a year, it's there. It's a format, they use it. Most times it is a requirement. A lot of times companies by default, and she was just talking about discrimination, a lot of companies would prefer someone who's gone to college and who's completed a degree to show expertise and also the knowledge of 4 years. What you do want to look for is when it says degree or, like she said, additional experience. But it's really on you to apply. Now, a lot of times I'm just tossing this out there. I've worked with a lot of different companies in their recruiting departments. I will say that 50% of the time, maybe 60, if you don't have it, you're not getting looked at. But it doesn't, it doesn't mean you don't apply. And one way to find out is what you said, if you can find a way to put it out there, or contact them and ask, hey, I saw this role, I want to apply, but before I do and waste your time and mine, I just want to ask, I've got 8 years or I've got 6 years, is that comparable? Would you still look at me? Would you still consider me? And you can find out if they respond back to you. But yeah, I would ask, or I would put it out there. Or if you just see a job and you're like, I'm going to apply anyway, it's a gamble. So
yes, it's good. I think one of the larger comments here, in fact, I'll just tie Mark and Samuel's questions together, is it's always, as you're both doing, it's always important to walk a mile in the employer's shoes. Imagine what the objection could be and try to overcome it in advance. Be thoughtful about that. And so you both mentioned some important, criteria that people are looking for: reasons for leaving, education, could be location, it could be job tenure, it could be, Dwena, like you said, skill set, right? So we have a little theme going on this morning around how does an employer vet candidates? What are they looking for? Because we say this on this call all the time. Employers are risk averse. They are risk averse, period. It is a big investment for them to make a hire, right? And so they want to take the time and make sure that they're checking as many boxes as possible to minimize that risk. Very different than when they're hiring a vendor, when they're hiring a consultant, when they're hiring a freelancer. There's like hardly any risk there at all. I mean, it's a short-term project, right? They're paying you a little money to do it. That's it. But when they are signing you up on their payroll, there's legal implications, there's financial implications, there's relational and cultural implications, there's performance expectations. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's a very big deal. They're taking a big liability. I mean, Mark knows this. They're taking a very big liability when they bring somebody on board. I'm not sure if you guys understand this. From a human resources perspective, from a legal perspective, it is a big responsibility for an employer to make sure they're checking all of the boxes and they've done their due diligence in the hiring process. So whatever that looks like to them, for some people, they do full-blown background checks and criminal and drug and whatever else, not everybody does that. A lot of people don't. But the point is that they could go to that extreme, because they just want to make sure that they're protected. Because if the government ever comes after them, which sometimes that happens, if the Department of Labor opens their books and say, did you, there's a lot of did yous. They got to be able to say, yes, we did, because the government is holding them to some very, very strict standards. Human resources professionals, God bless them. I don't know how they do it, but they got to keep all this law in their head. And there's an alphabet soup of regulations that they've got to make sure that they check, because the government is asking them to, for demanding that they do. Again, completely different when you're self-employed. There's hardly, I mean, there's some, but there's hardly regulations around that. And so they can kind of quickly hire somebody and it's no big deal. But please know, this is why they do all of this. They've got to make sure that they are bringing somebody on board legally, ethically, the person's going to be productive, a good fit, right salary, you get it? Do you see how complicated it is? So that's why we try to answer all of these different questions for you, but understand that you got to walk a mile in their shoes, not only in yours.
Great. That sounds. And I was also thinking about this, that if possible, because I mean, I've tried that before and it didn't go well for me. So I was just thinking about it, like, how about if I go in as a individual, like contractor, like I'm just gonna work for them as personal contractor, and it would just be like they pay me for the job that I do. And I was thinking about that, but I actually saw one I think I saw one on Indeed, and they were saying something about that, like you can only apply if you want to work for them, but not like being an individual contractor.
Right. Well, I was going to say, like, not everybody's okay with that. In fact, most people aren't. So here's the other side of it. Okay. So on the one side, there's all that legal stuff that they've got to worry about. On the other side, if an employer wants to bring you on full time, it's like they're saying, we want you to be part of our family. We don't want to share you with anybody else. And that's what's going on a lot these days. In fact, I forget what the name is, Alki. I'm not sure if you know what I'm talking about. There's a little term for it. It's a very new thing where there are some people who are I don't know if they're calling it job sharing, something like that, where
Fractional?
a person, what is it?
Is it the fractional one?
No. Fractional is very okay. Fractional is very ethical. This is an unethical thing some people are
Oh.
doing. I think they're calling it job sharing. But anyway, the person will take and by the way, Sammy, I'm not saying that you're suggesting this. I just want to give you the other side, okay? The thing they're trying to avoid. There's some people who will take the job and they actually won't do the job. They'll actually outsource it to other people on the sly. Like they're running their own little business. I know, it's right. Okay, so that's an extreme thing that, you know, some people are doing, but that's not your specific question. The thing is that if you are a contractor, first of all, that by definition means that they have to allow you to have other clients, which means that's going to take time away from doing the job that they've hired you for. And if they have the need for, if you will, a 40-hour-a-week person, they don't want to share you with other employers where you're going to be bifurcating your time. Okay. And so that's why they've made it a W-2 job. If though they don't have the need for 40 hours a week, they're perfectly happy doing. In fact, they prefer to do a contract. Oh, we only need you 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week. Yeah, please feel free to supplement your time with other clients. But that's a business decision for them as to whether or not they feel like they need you that whole time. Okay. So they may or may not be open to the contracting thing. And the other side too is if you do become a contractor, there's a couple things. This is a little legal. Okay. If you're a contractor, and they want to treat you like a W-2 employee, in other words, supervise you, you actually have to go through a third party. You have to go through a staffing agency or some sort of contracting agency, because that agency has to hold your W-2 status so that you can then work as a contractor for the employer and they can traditionally supervise you. If you don't have a staffing agency or don't have someone who can treat you like a W-2 employee, then what happens is they're actually not allowed to supervise you. In other words, you are, they can't treat you like an employee. They have to treat you like you have to be able to make your own independent decisions. So for someone like me and Alki, we're consultants, okay? And we fall under this category. And so what'll happen is if an employer hires us, yes, they give us their requirements and we, talk with them about the needs, but we go and do our work independently. We are not supervised by the client. They don't micromanage our work. They don't oversee how we do it that we are independent workers. And so because of that, we don't have to be treated like a W-2 employee because they're not supervising us. They're not treating us like an employee. But if they do want to treat you like an employee, then you do have to go through a staffing agency. I hope that's not too complicated, but again, there's a lot of legalese around this. It's not as simple as saying, hey, let me just be your contractor. You have to have the staffing agency, or they have to need you in the contracting capacity, not just, full-time person.
Yeah. That sounds smart.
Yeah. All right. Other thoughts, other questions? I know we have a small group today. Edwina, anything else from you?
Actually, yes. While you were talking, you said that employer have to really vet you to know if it's a good fit, because there's a lot of things that imply. So how do an employee vet an employer to see if it's a good fit? Because I have both sides. Because
Yes.
again, if they're bringing the wrong person, even like if you're not a good fit, it's just like it's a waste of time. It's a lot of stress.
Great question. Yeah, you are the other side of the equation. Absolutely. You should be vetting it for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to think about, on the flip side, you have to think about the criteria that's important to you. Okay. It could be everything from logistical things like, is it remote work, hybrid work, that kind of stuff. The work-life balance category. Okay. How much extra time are they going to be requiring of you? How demanding is the work? Are you going to be able to have a life? Or are you going to be working 60, 70 hours a week? Okay. So there's things like that. Okay. There are things like the skill set that we talked about. What kind of skill, what are you going to be set up for success?
Yeah.
And you need to think about that. What does that look like for you? What does success look for them and for you? So it's making sure that there's a good fit. Do you meet their needs? Do you meet their needs? Not just are you qualified, but are you going to be able to deliver the work in a way that is appropriate for them? So that means you have to really start to understand the job and ask good questions about the scope of the role. What do they really need from you? What are their outcomes? What kind of deliverables are you going to need to produce for them? You know, what are the challenges that you're going to be solving, short term, long term? What does success look like in the first 12 months for them? There's all of that, right? The scope of the work. Then there's the culture.
Yeah.
And that's this you and the supervisor, that's you and the team, and that's you and the organization. It's 3 different things. Now, things change because people change, people, you know, stay in jobs. You know, your boss could quit 3 months after you start. They're not going to tell you. You never know. Things happen. Your teammates are going to change. All these things are variable. So there's only so much you can vet. However, you certainly can ask questions to your boss about their leadership style, their management style, their supervisory style. Not everybody's comfortable answering that question. So you could, if they feel a little bit squeamish, you could say, well, let me just give you an example, right? So, you know, I've worked with certain kinds of supervisors in the past. Some have communicated with me this way. Some supervise me that way. Like, I'm just kind of curious, you know, what's your style? What are your expectations of me? What are your expectations for our communication and our relationship, right? How do you like to give feedback? What are your pet peeves? What's an idea? What kind of employees do you really enjoy working with? What's an ideal candidate for this role? I mean, things like that, you know, and you can really hear their heart around, you know, what kind of qualities. For some people, it's all about your relationship building skills. For other people, it's all about your accuracy. For other people, it's all about your ability to engage with their customers or their members, or a million things. But asking about the supervisor and then asking what the culture of the team is like. Because you can say, I really want to fit in well. What's the team dynamic here? And then you can ask the broader question around the organizational culture. And some, you know, organizations have cultures. Like a law firm is going to probably be very different than a school. I don't know. You know, they're just right. So you want to ask what some of the broader things are, and then also whatever is important to you. Do you have any must-haves?
Yeah.
Do you have any must-haves? And if you do, you want to make sure that those are clear up front.
Okay.
Now, don't make it your first question, but you know, but I bring it up certainly in the first interview just to make sure that the opportunity is going to match, you know, check all your boxes. Alki, other thoughts?
Yeah, everything that she said is true. And the other angle that I want to add to this is, like all the questions she just went through, what would be lovely is if interviews were two-way conversations where they actually either ask you all those questions, ask you even if you have any questions, or if they take an hour interview where they usually take the first 50 minutes to 55 usually, and then there's like 3 or 4 minutes left. Hey, do you have any questions? And then they've got like 2 other people to talk to, and you have this list of things. You're like, hey, actually, yeah, I have like a whole hour worth of things that I want to know. Unfortunately, it doesn't go that way. And so I tell candidates all the time, even though it is an interview, I tell candidates, your mindset is it's a meeting. It's not an interview, it's a meeting. You don't always get that though, and you have to kind of give them the leverage, because if you go in, like she said, with the wrong attitude or say the wrong thing first, could be a waste of time from the start. But I look at it as a mirror. I split the interview table down the middle. One side is their side. All the stuff that Shira just said, job description says, what they're looking for, what they need. And then they got all these questions for you. And then they're judging you and they're checking off in their notes. Hey, this is good. This is bad. This is good. You have that same side. And I tell candidates, instead of waiting till the interview, if you're fortunate, not everybody is, some things happen, you lose jobs, you know, money is an issue, so you take what you got to get and all those types of things. But I tell candidates to be just as proactive as the company. They took time out and really thought about this job description and the type of person that they want, the money they want to spend, the time period they want to make a hire, how many interviews they want to do, who's involved in the interview process. That's a whole side. Well, you can do the same thing. You can sit down before your job search or just pause your job search and go, you know what? What am I looking for? What do I really want? Money, culture, all the things Shira just said. And then when you go to the table, it's either going to be they do all the talking and you don't get a chance to ask, but you can then listen to how they're asking you questions. How aggressive are they? Are they really listening to you? Or are they just moving through like a checkoff list? Or if they ask you questions or ask you if you have it, do you have any questions? That's your chance to flip to the other side of the table and you start interviewing them. And so that would be my mindset is, yep, what's a great fit in my mind that I want, that I'm looking for. And I think I tell candidates that's how you should go into the interview. Sure, they're sitting over there saying, we're interviewing her. We got all these questions for her. You're sitting over there going, depends on how they answer this question. That'll let me know, maybe what I need to know or what I want to answer. And you go in proactively. And that way it's more like, not so much, are you a good fit for them only, but are they a good fit for you, which is what Shira just said too. So.
And so here's another subtlety, right? Two more things. First of all, try to have a must-have and a nice-to-have list. There are some things that are make or breakers for you. Some things that you'll be flexible if they don't actually have what you need. That's good because it helps you to vet whatever they're saying, but it also will help guide the kinds of questions you actually ask. Whatever question you ask, the employer is going to listen for what you're asking, because then they're also going to make certain assumptions about that. I wonder why she's asking that question. She's asking that question because it's important to her. And they might actually put overemphasis on the nature of your question, thinking it's something super important to you. And I just had, literally as we speak, I have this happen for a candidate. And this candidate, so this is it's ironic because you know how a lot of people these days want remote work and they don't want hybrid. Well, this candidate's kind of the opposite. She really likes to be with people. And this job is fully remote. Okay. Although they do meet once a month in person, but basically it's remote. Well, anyway, in the interview, like 2 or 3 times, she asked, so, what do you guys do when you get together? And do you, how often do you meet? And, what's it like when you're like, she asked these questions that had to do with the in-person side of things. So it actually raised a red flag for the employer, because the employer is like, oh, gosh, when she asks these questions, it makes us feel like she's not going to be happy working remotely. The employer, very sensitive as they are, they didn't judge her for it. They're like, very lovely that she wants to do that, but we can't offer that to her. In fact, even if she were to come into the office, there'd basically be nobody here. So is she going to feel frustrated that she's not going to have people around her? And I brought that up to the candidate and she's like, oh yeah, well, I know they probably get that impression. I didn't really mean it to like that. In fact, if anything, I actually like the fact that it's remote because I can spend time with family, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that she asked the question, not just once, but 2 or 3, made an emphasis to them that says, we can't offer her this. So maybe she's not going to like working here. Be careful in the questions you ask and how it could be perceived. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because I can see, because I had the interview, but it's just like, I don't know, there's like, even though like they're talking through like, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, it's not clear. It's like sometimes you read the job description and you have the interview and things clear up for you.
Right.
I feel like there's like an obscurity somewhere. Like I'm not getting all the information that I need.
Sure.
And currently I'm in a situation where I'm working somewhere. I wish I vent that I really know how to vent them to know that it wasn't a good fit for me, because I'm the kind of person who like to communicate. That's the managerial style that I like. Like something happened, we could sit down, we discuss it. What is like the plan of action we're gonna take? This, that, and I don't find that. And I like a not really like a relax. I don't like to be like somebody to be over my shoulder all the time, you know. So this is why I'm like, maybe I'm trying to understand my style better now. And kind of like vet like an employer before I could say yes, because I don't get in a situation where I'm not sure that our style will like come together.
And you know what? They're thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
This is like dating. I always refer it to it as dating, except that it's a really short dating process. It's like 2 or 3 dates and then you got to go live together. It's like, and nobody knows if you're going to leave the toothpaste cap on or not. Like they don't have, right? You don't know until you're there. Who's going to, how are you going to load the dishwasher? So it's really, it's tricky for everybody. Okay. So that's why they're trying to figure out your fit. You're trying to figure out their fit, which is again, the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. If that whole don't look over my shoulder thing is a big, huge must-have for you, if it is, you may want to think about a way to ask that question and say, well, how hands-off or hands-on, that's a nice, instead of saying micromanaging, how hands-off or hands-on do you tend to be with folks in my position? Okay. Sometimes a supervisor is just a hands-on person because they're a hands-on person. Sometimes they're hands-on because they had a previous underperformer and they lost trust. And so now they start to be hands-on. Or sometimes they just lose trust in you because, you did something, right? And then they like, oh, now I got to start micromanaging, whatever it is, sometimes it's situational. It's not just a general way. It's your relationship with them. And sometimes you're just not going to know until you get into the job, and they're taking the same risk because they don't know who you are until you get the job either. So think about it. What are the things that in general, you just need or don't want? Think about questions that you can ask that are sensitive. But remember, if there's something that's just a nice to have, I would hesitate to really bring that up in the interview because it's going to make it feel to them like it's a must-have for you. If it's something that you can live with either which way, you're just curious, I wouldn't ask curious questions. I'd ask the questions that are most important to you.
Okay. All right, perfect. And now, if you don't ask those questions during the interview, when do you put it up then, those type of questions?
Yeah, it depends on what the questions are. I mean, and it also depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to the type of recruiter on the first level who's just check, you can ask some of these questions, but understand they may not be able to answer, may not be in their purview. If you're talking to the hiring manager, cultural questions are a lot easier for them. Supervisory relationship, the team, that kind of thing. The recruiter may or may not know those things. You're welcome. Listen, you are always welcome to ask the recruiter anything. You can stump them, and we have no problem with you stumping us. None at all. You can ask us a ton of things. What we might say is, that's a really great question, Joanna. That's probably better for the hiring manager.
Okay.
That's okay. You can ask things in the first level, but in the first level, try to really do your punch list. Okay. What are the big things that are going to help you to decide if you even want to go to the next level? Okay. Whether it's things like work-life balance, things like the skill set, just the basic, just like they're checking the basics with you in the first level. Can you this? Do you that? What's the compensation? Blah, blah, blah. To make sure you should even go to the next level, you need to have that same kind of punch list. What are the just top level things?
Thank you.
Sure. Alki, any other thoughts?
That was big. I was going to say what Shira just said is big, and most people don't really get to this part of the impact of the interview, and also how to frame questions, which is sometimes it's a shame because I've seen candidates who are qualified, beyond qualified. They have everything you need, but to that risk averse point that Shira made, and sometimes, whatever, nervousness or these, some managers are looser than others. And then there's some managers and recruiters and other people on like panel interviews who are they're sitting at the edge of their seat for every verb, vowel, adjective that you say. And they're like, oops, she breathed before she said it, checking it off. Or she looked left and they're checking it off. And it's crazy because then if you ask a question, to Shira's point, why is she asking that? Which is so funny. And I don't want to say hypocritical, but it's so funny because to your other point, how strong are you in that? That's how a lot of companies feel is, hey, it's our job. We can ask any question we want. But then if you start questioning, so there are a lot of companies and organizations that are hire centric and candidate centric, fortunately, and they will have those conversations. Please, you got any questions? Let me know. Here's my card. Call me tonight. Let's go out and have coffee and talk about this further. I call those, the good ones. But to her point, if you do have a middle person, like a recruiter, I mean, you don't want to overdo it, but especially if they engage you or they say, hey, let me know if you have any questions. You said, let me know if I have any questions. That's how you can get some of those questions answered. So she mentioned dating, and I do the same thing too, because it's just like dating, and we're like matchmakers a lot of times. So you can imagine if you had a friend, cousin, whoever, and they're like, hey, I got somebody for you. Oh yeah, what are they like? How tall are they? Eye color, hair color, all that. Those are the things you're finding out to check your boxes with that recruiter person first, or whoever your person is. get all of the facts that you can, and you can begin to shape your list in. Okay, must-haves, I can check this. They even have these nice-to-haves. Good. And you learn as much as you can so that when you go into that interview, you also get an idea of maybe how you can talk and ask questions and frame questions. But yeah, that's a tricky one, how to frame questions. And they could be innocent questions too, but they're going to be thinking, hey, why is she asking that? Does that mean
Why is she asking that?
And it's crazy because you just have questions. But I say ask them, and to Shira's point, just think through your question and put yourself in their shoes as well. Like she says too, like, hey, if somebody was to ask me that, would I get offended? And just think of ways that you can maybe balance it out and keep it as neutral as possible, which isn't always easy because it's also good to be straightforward. But yeah, I just say think about all your questions and think about neutral ways to ask, but still get the information that you need.
Walk a mile in their shoes. They're minimizing their risk, right? So yeah, it could be, are they going to be offended? It could be, is this going to cause a red flag for them? Are they going to think that I'm asking this question? Because look, people only ask questions that are important to them. Think about that. Why else would you ask a question unless you really wanted to know? So psychologically, the employer's like, she really wants to know this. It's really important to her. I wonder if we're actually going to be able to fulfill her need. So it's not even just about them. It's about you and them thinking, is she going to like it here? Are we going to be what she wants? And they might make assumptions based upon the kind of question you ask around whether or not they feel like they're going to be able to fulfill your needs. So that's why the must-have and nice-to-have is important. I just go more with the must-haves.
Thank you.
And they're nervous Nellies too. Sometimes they're overly nervous and they shouldn't be. So, and that's another reason why I tell candidates. I said meeting earlier, conversation. It's a conversation, not just an interview. And so, if you find ways to if you ask a question, you can tell the same way that they ask you questions, and they can tell, oops, that question kind of got her. She's a little nervous. Well, when you ask them questions, you can kind of tell too. And that's where the conversational piece comes out too. Like, oh, yeah, I was just asking because, I had this happen before and I'm looking for this. And it sounds like it sounds like this is a place I could do that. So that's good. And then that kind of maybe gives them like, okay.
Help them understand why you're asking. In fact, that's actually an interesting way to do it, is not just ask the question, give the backstory as to why you're asking the question.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mark, you would know that as somebody who asks questions from time to time, huh?
Yes, yeah. I do.
All right. Anything else we can address for you guys? Okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and stop the recording. And then for anybody who would like to stay on for the prayer call, you are certainly welcome to do that.